At 58, Dr. Amelia Hart had learned that quiet can be the loudest thing in a room. The adobe loft she shared with her husband, Lucas, sat on the edge of Santa Fe, where dusk painted the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, a bruised purple, and the air smelled of pinyon, smoke, and rain. She loved order color-coded charts, tidy shelves, predictable endings, and tonight she wanted nothing more than chamomile tea and Lucas's easy laugh drifting from the kitchen. Her leather satchel thudded against the brick. It slipped from fingers, still stiff from holding a patient's hand, as test results detonated a life. In the dim, she noticed small betrayals. First, a button glinting beneath the Kiva fireplace, a wine glass with lipstick she didn't own, a chiffon scarf. Eleanor's favorite shade of storm blue looped like a dare over the back of the sofa. Amelia stood still. She had once believed Eleanor, her younger sister, with a meteor's charm and a chaos-sweet smile, could be trusted with anything, even Amelia's softest secrets. Beyond the arched doorway came a laugh, familiar, intimate, careless. Amelia's breath went thin. The long shadows on the plaster looked like knife marks. Outside, thunder walked the mesas. Inside, something split open. The sound that broke her was not the gasp behind the archway, not the breathless giggle that didn't belong to her life. It was the hollow thud of her satchel meeting the saltillo tile, a clean, final period. At the end of a sentence she hadn't realized she'd been writing. Dr. Amelia Hart did not scream. She did what she had been trained to do in ER bays at 3 a.s. point. When arteries misbehaved and panic tried to crawl up her throat, she assessed. 1 lipstick-scarred glass, 2 plates, a cufflink Lucas never wore to work, Eleanor's storm blue scarf. Findings consistent with a story she refused to narrate. She stepped back into the bruised evening and let the door ease shut. Thunder rumbled somewhere over the high desert, rolling like a drum line across the mesas. Amelia drifted down the adobe steps, past the chilly ristras and the potted sage she'd babied through a late frost, to her car. She locked herself inside, hands white on the wheel, pulse a hard metronome. A memory surfaced misses. Vargas that afternoon, knuckles swallowed by hers. As the biopsy results arrived, "You're not alone," Amelia had whispered, meaning it with her whole practiced heart. Now the words boomeranged back cruelly. Alone sounded like freedom if she tilted it just right. Her phone lit up. Lucas. Then again. Then Eleanor. She watched the screen pulse and still did not answer. She drove. Through the art district where Lucas had kissed her the first week, they moved to Santa Fe, past the gallery that sold the bronze raven she loved, across the narrow bridge that shivered above the arroyo. She parked at the overlook below Cross of the Martyrs and stared down at the city. Santa Fe glowed like a constellation spilled across the earth, innocent, historic, indifferent. Shock arrived in efficient waves. Grief tried to follow, but something colder got there. First clarity that felt like steel cooling in water. Forgiveness had always been a fluent language for Amelia. Tonight, she discovered she could speak strategy. She opened notes and made a list, like she would for a complicated trauma case. Call attorney. Pull bank statements. Photograph everything. Change passcode. Do not engage emotionally. Contact Jason. Jason Ward, Eleanor's husband, was a history teacher with the patience of stone and a fondness for dry jokes that took a beat to land. He had once fixed their swamp cooler in August and refused payment with a shrug. Amelia typed his name and hovered. Then she remembered Eleanor's meteor-bright smile at every dinner, every move, every holiday, always orbiting Lucas, as if gravity had been rewritten. She pressed call. Amelia Jason's voice sounded older than last week. "Can you meet me?" she asked. "Tomorrow. Noon. Sage and Stone on Canyon Road." Silence. "Then I was hoping you'd call." She hung up and let the next step shape itself. Lucas first. Control the narrative. Choose the battlefield. She texted, "Meet me at Marcelino's at 7. Alone." His reply landed. Before she could lock the screen. "Thank God. I'll be there. Please. Millie, I love you." She stared at the little name she hadn't let anyone else use. Millie. It shed its tenderness and lay there like a trick coin. Amelia started the engine and turned the car toward home, not to forgive, not to rage, but to prepare. In the closet, she slid her grandmother's silver necklace into a pocket. On the dresser, she lined up a small army of truths, screen-recorded messages, timstampet fotos, a copied house deed. She'd signed with Lucas the day they'd promised futures. She packed an overnight bag with the calm of a surgeon assembling instruments. On a yellow legal pad she wrote, in block letters, only she would recognize as a prayer and an ultimatum, I coos the terms. When the house finally went quiet, she stood in the dark of the kitchen, listening to the cooling clicks of the oven, the distant mutter of thunder, the soft animal sound of her own breathing. The life she had curated in earth tones and clean lines had been breached. Fine. She would redraw the map. The first cut had been theirs. The next precise incision would be hers. Sage and stone smelled like cinnamon and cedar when Amelia slipped into the corner booth. Noon light spilled across the adobe walls, catching in the steam from a dozen mugs. She set her back to the room, the way ER habits taught her eyes on exits, hands steady around the cup she didn't taste. Jason Ward arrived on time, but looked late to his own life, jaw dark with stubble, shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in a chair. He didn't bother with hello. He slid a thick manila envelope across the table and rested his palms on it as if it might run. I found a phone, he said, in a planter behind our dryer. Eleanor's. Amelia felt the air notch colder. Burner. He nodded. Text threads with Lucas. Go back 9 months. Photos. Hotel confirmations. Under his initials. Calendar screens from your practice. He swallowed. She had your schedule. Mill doctor. Hart. Down to the half hour. Amelia pictured the blue dot that had shadowed her life without her consent. The violation landed like a bruise. There's more. Jason pushed the flap open. On top printouts, time-stamped messages, receipts for a weekend, art retreat in Taos, a deposit on a rental loft in Portland under L. Mercer and E. Ward. Lucas's middle name was Mercer. Jason's last name on Eleanor's arm, borrowed for convenience. Portland, Amelia asked. Lucas interviewed last week with a boutique firm there. Eleanor called it our clean slate. Jason exhaled, emptying something he'd been holding too long. Amelia, I kept telling myself it was an emotional thing, that if I loved her harder, she'd come back. He hesitated, then slid a folded page free, like it might cut him. This is why I called you sooner rather than later. The handwriting was Eleanor's looping, certain. Amelia read the first line and felt the table steady under her elbows. Late again. 2 tests. Positive. Below it, a list of weeks, crossed out appointments, a question that made Amelia's pulse go quiet in her ears. Tell Lucas. Tell Jason. A scribble. Don't know who scratched so hard the paper pilled. Amelia's training moved in before grief could. Dates. Conception windows. The weeks she'd been at the hospital overnight. The weekends Lucas had claimed fishing trips that smelled like hotel soap when he came home. Jason watched her do the math. I don't know if she'll keep it, he said softly. I don't know anything right now. A new column opened in Amelia's mind, neat and merciless. Preserve evidence. No confrontations without counsel. If pregnancy confirmed, establish paternity through counsel only. Protect practice. Home. Retirement accounts. Document every contact. This changes scope, she said. Voice level. Not aim. Jason's mouth twitched somewhere between a wince and respect. What are you going to do? Control the terms. She slid the envelope into her bag. Thank you for bringing this to me. They parted with a packed short. Spare. Practical. Partners. For now, in truth. At 6:58 p.m. Marcelino's buzzed with the soft clink of stemware and the comfort of red-checked tablecloths. Lucas arrived wearing contrition like a tailored jacket and carrying lilies. Amelia didn't like. He reached for her hands. She let him have the table edge instead. You look... God. Amelia. We're not doing the monologue, she said. We're doing specifics. He blinked, regrouped. Fine. Specifics. I got an offer in Portland. It's a real partner track. We could leave all this start over near the river. New place. New friends. I've already looked at a loft. On Water Avenue, she asked mildly. The stutter in his pupils pleased a colder part of her. How did you? Because I'm smarter than the story you're telling, she said. If we even discuss rebuilding, there will be conditions. He leaned in. Scent of expensive soap and panic. Anything. She placed a single sheet on the table. The language crisp and surgical postnuptial terms drafted that afternoon between patient rounds. Her practice protected. The house. The accounts. A breach clause. With teeth. Lucas starred. Throat working. This is extreme. So is sleeping with my sister, Amelia said, calm as a chart note. He looked like a man calculating how much blood he could lose and still walk out. Then he reached for the pen. Before ink met paper, the waiter set down 2 waters and a folded note. From the hostess, Dr. Hart. Inside, in Eleanor's tidy loops. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. The pond at Arroyo Park. Amelia slid the note beneath the postnup and tapped the signature line. One thing at a time, she said, and watched Lucas sign. The unexpected had arrived like a storm front. Fine. She marked its edges, measured its winds, and chose her shelter. The pond at Arroyo Park mirrored a sky rinsed clean by last night's rain. Cottonwoods flicked light across the water. Mallards stitched slow, V's through the green. Eleanor sat where they used to toss breadcrumbs as kids, arms wrapped around herself like a tourniquet. Her storm blue scarf, always a performance, was gone. No mascara, no armor, just a woman who had run out of pretty exits. Amelia, she said, and the name trembled. Doctor. Amelia Hart took the bench, but not the offered history. In the ER, she'd learned that stories multiply when people are frightened. Facts don't. She kept her feet flat, a spine long, hands quiet in her lap. I made mistakes. Eleanor rushed. I think I'm pregnant. She said it in the same breath people use. For I didn't mean to, and please fix this. 2 tests. I don't know if... Amelia lifted a palm. That belongs to doctors and lawyers. Not this bench. Hurt flashed across Eleanor's face. Then indignation tried to crawl in. Lucas loves me, she insisted. You were always married to your work. He needed permission. Amelia finished, cool as saline. He needed permission to make himself the center of a softer story. The sentence surprised her with its steadiness. Somewhere between the living room's ruin and this sunlit shoreline, something inside Amelia had rotated into place. She no longer craved confession or apologies that rearranged nothing. She didn't want to trade monologues. She wanted alignment between what was true and what would happen next. I'm not here to argue mythology, she said. I'm here to set terms. Eleanor blinked. Terms. Amelia's voice took on the precise cadence she used when explaining risk to a family at 2 a.m. You will have no contact with Lucas. You will get a therapist who does not drink wine with you or repeat your excuses. You will let your attorney handle any questions about paternity, and you will not use my name to soften the consequences for choices that were yours. For a beat, only ducks answered. Then Eleanor whispered, So that's it? I lose my sister. You lost me the night. You chose secrecy over decency, Amelia said, not unkindly. Whether you ever find me again is on you. She stood. The park smelled like wet earth and beginnings. Eleanor reached for her sleeve, then thought better. Do you hate me? Amelia considered. Hate would have been hot. What lived in her now was colder and cleaner, a sterile field before an incision. I prefer accuracy, she said. Hate blurs the edges. Back in her car, Amelia watched parents push strollers along the path where she and Eleanor had once raced bikes. The ache was real, but it had a shape she could name. Not a wound anymore. A scar, forming. Clarity rearranged her next moves. Lucas had signed the postnup. He would perform repentance flowers, notes, dinners, as if penance could be itemized. He would also, she knew now, try to migrate the story to Portland, where new scenery could serve as proof of change. Let him rehearse. She would supply the audience. Witnesses kill gaslighting. That thought flashed like sun on the pond. In medicine, you chart, so truth survives the shift change. In marriage, you invite light where lies prefer dim rooms. She texted Lucas, "I want to renew our vows. Small. Family. Before we make any decisions about Portland." His reply came breathless. "Yes. Anything." Amelia exhaled. Not relief commitment. The ceremony wouldn't be theater for forgiveness. It would be an autopsy with flowers. Not to humiliate, but to end a story cleanly, with facts no one could rearrange later. She drove home through streets, turned sharp with focus. On her kitchen counter, she opened a fresh legal pad and wrote 3 lines. "Tell the truth plainly. Protect what I've built. Leave only when I choose." The perspective had shifted. She wasn't the abandoned wife, orbiting other people's momentum. She was the surgeon. Again, steady hands, clear field, decisive cut. And when it was over, she would close with care and walk out under her own power. The embossed invitations looked like grace notes, cream stock, gold script, a small juniper sprig pressed into each envelope. Renewal of vows. Family only. Riverside Courtyard. Saturday at 4. People love a comeback story. Amelia would give them one, just not the ending they expected. Opportunity doesn't always show up as an open door. Sometimes, it's a well-lit room where shadows can't hide. The ceremony would be that room. She booked the courtyard, requested a simple arch, and asked the venue for a projector and a discreet audio hookup for a short family montage. The coordinator, a woman with kind eyes and a clipboard full of solutions, promised everything would be seamless. Before the ink dried on the RSVPs, Amelia sat with her attorney. They went line by line through what could be shared without breaking laws or handing Lucas a countersuit. Private event. No defamation. Only primary sources and timestamps. Names already known to the room. Keep commentary factual. The lawyer arched a brow at the vow idea, then nodded once. "You're meticulous. Stay that way." Jason handled the tech a clean slideshow of screenshots, hotel confirmations, calendar grabs. He labeled each image like a museum placard: date, time, context. He did not editorialize. "If she really is pregnant," he said, "we'll let counsel manage the science. Today is just light." Light, Amelia thought. In medicine, you flood a wound with it, so nothing festers. In marriage, too. While the plan took shape, another door cracked open. This time not about endings at all. The Regional Trauma Network emailed, asking if she'd chair a pilot on caregiver resilience. Her name had come up after a conference case study she'd presented. The stipend was modest, the schedule flexible. It felt like a hand on her back, steadying, nudging. She said yes. It wasn't escape. It was expansion. Lucas, meanwhile, leaned into repentance as if it were cardio flowers she didn't like. texts every hour, dinners. He swore he'd learn to cook. He spoke about Portland like a magic word, river walks, Saturday markets, a fresh start where people don't know our history. He pictured geography as absolution. Amelia pictured witnesses. She chose an off-white dress, not bridal, not mourning. She replaced the lilies he'd bought with daisies and yellow roses, her favorites, which he never remembered. She called her mother and father and told them this was about healing, which was true in its own way. She called Eleanor, too, because accuracy matters. If an ending is going to be honest, every character should be seated. Eleanor's voice was small. "Are you sure you want me there?" "I want the record complete," Amelia said. "What you do with it afterward is yours." The morning of, she walked the courtyard with the coordinator and tested the clicker. The junipers smelled like clean air after rain. Jason stood at the back, hands in his pockets, eyes steady. "You can still cancel," he said. "I'm not angry enough to cancel," Amelia answered. "I'm exact enough to proceed." Guests arrived in Sunday polish. Lucas looked nervous and handsome, a man who believed in performances. The officiant cleared his throat. Chairs creaked. Somewhere, a fountain threaded water through stone. Amelia scanned the faces. Her parents, a few colleagues, Jason alone. In the last row, Eleanor slipped in at the end, hair pulled back, a plain dress that made her look like the little sister who used to steal Amelia's sweaters and return them with candy wrappers in the pockets. For a breath, grief pressed a thumb into Amelia's ribs. Then it eased. A scar doesn't ask you to forget. It asks you to honor what you survived. This was the opportunity, not to destroy, but to document. Not to punish, but to end cleanly. Not to be talked over later by prettier lies. She took her place beside Lucas and felt the old ache do nothing to her posture. "Ready," the officiant whispered. "Yes," Amelia said, and meant it. When the officiant nodded to Lucas, he gripped her hands and spoke the lines he'd rehearsed in the mirror. Contrition smoothed into poetry. People dabbed at eyes. The fountain hushed itself to listen. For years, Amelia would have met him halfway, filling silence with grace, so no one had to sit in discomfort. That woman had done the emotional heavy lifting for every room. This woman let the silence work. "Amelia," the officiant turned to her, "your vows." She faced the guests first. Parents, colleagues, neighbors who'd watched them hang Christmas lights and borrow ladders. "Thank you for being here," she said. "It matters that we tell the truth where love once lived." She looked back at Lucas. 5 years ago, I promised to treat our home like a sanctuary. I kept that promise. You did not. No tremor, no heat, just the clean angle of a fact. Murmurs rippled. Lucas squeezed her fingers, an old cue to soften. She removed her hands and took the small remote from the lectern. The screen behind them woke to a text thread labeled with dates and times. No commentary, no adjectives. Hotel confirmations, calendar screenshots, mirroring nights she'd been on call. A deposit receipt for a Portland loft. In the last row, Jason stood with the technician's stillness of a person who has learned not to flinch. Lucas stepped toward the cable. "Amelia, Please, we are in a room full of people who love us, she said. Steady. They deserve the same clarity I do. She clicked forward to the message he'd sent 2 weeks ago. Be patient. Once she says yes to Portland, we'll figure out the rest. She didn't look at Eleanor, seated near the aisle, fists white around a tissue. Compassion tugged, then released. Growth, she realized, wasn't getting tougher. It was getting exact. She turned off the screen. There won't be a renewal today, she told the officiant gently. To Lucas, she added, you signed a postnup. Per clause 19. Any contact with my sister voids joint claims to the house and savings. Legal will coordinate your move out by Friday. Your car and business remain yours. Counsel will address any paternity questions through appropriate channels. It would have been easy to puncture him with a line that made the room gasp. The old her might have reached for a one-liner to win the scene. The new her chose a scalpel over a spear. I release you, she said simply, not to bless what you did, but to stop letting it decide who I am. Eleanor stood, lips parting for a defense that had always worked on family. Amelia lifted a hand not to shame, but to set a boundary, shaped like a door she wasn't yet ready to open. No more today. Get a good therapist. Tell the truth there first. She removed her ring and placed it on the booklet the officiant held. The metal was lighter than she expected, already losing its gravity. Her mother started to rise, then sat, when Amelia met her eyes and offered a small nod. I'm okay. Because she had charted the wound, irrigated it with light, protected the healthy tissue. The rest would be healing, unglamorous, daily, hers. Afterward, as conversations eddied into the courtyard, people tried to press their versions of comfort into her hands. Platitudes, Autrage, advice. Amelia thanked them and kept her posture. She didn't owe anyone a performance of collapse. She didn't owe Lucas an audience or Eleanor a shortcut. She owed herself continuity. In the quiet of the bridal room, she washed her face, traded the off-white dress for a navy wrap, and slipped on her grandmother's silver necklace. In the mirror, she looked like herself. Fewer apologies. Clear is. Growth wasn't fireworks. It was a series of small, adult choices made in the open. Tell the truth. Protect the work. Leave when you decide. She stepped back into the sun, felt the juniper-scented air fill her lungs, and walked toward a future that would not be chosen for her. 3 weeks later, the house sounded different. Not empty, honest. The cream sofa that had learned too much was gone, replaced by a cobalt love seat she'd chosen for no one's taste but her own. The mantel no longer held engagement photos. It held a framed snapshot of Amelia in scrubs, hair a mess, eyes bright after a night shift that went right. Daisies and yellow roses, her actual favorites, stood in a glass pitcher, a card tucked inside for the chapter you're writing. A friend. She didn't need to know which one. The divorce moved, like good medicine, slow enough to be safe, firm enough to work. Lucas attempted a few last dramatics, then remembered Clause 19 and learned efficiency. Attorneys handled paternity logistics. Amelia didn't indulge hypotheticals. Truth would arrive by certified mail, not by midnight panic. Some evenings, she walked the Arroyo Trail and let the desert teach her about repair, how scorched ground grows green in precise, stubborn ways. She answered patients with more gentleness than before and fewer apologies. When a resident asked how to keep showing up after a loss, Amelia surprised herself. "You build systems that outlast your feelings," she said. "Then you let the feelings pass through." The pilot on caregiver resilience took off. She convened nurses, techs, and physicians in a sunny conference room and asked the question no one ever had time to ask: "What's costing you the most? And what can we redesign?" People cried. People laughed. People drew on Post-its and left lighter than they arrived. On the second session, a program director from a major Northwest medical center sat quietly in the back and, afterward, offered Amelia a visiting post to scale the work statewide, flexible, well-funded, hers to shape. It wasn't a getaway. It was a runway. Jason came by the clinic with a new book for the waiting room, short stories his students loved. A looked rested. "I'm seeing someone," he said, "bashful, as a teenager. Her name's Grace. She laughs at my worst jokes." Amelia grinned. "Keep her." They didn't trade war stories. They traded recipes and book recommendations, and the kind of silence that feels like trust. Eleanor wrote a letter that arrived without return address. It wasn't a plea. It was the first document Amelia had seen from her sister that contained only nouns and verbs. "I started therapy. I told the truth. I am ashamed. I will not contact you again unless you make the first move." Amelia placed the letter in a file labeled with a single word: boundaries. Forgiveness, she decided, would not be an event she owed anyone. It would be a possibility that grew only if the conditions were right. On a wind-clean Saturday, Amelia packed 2 suitcases, shut off lights. She no longer needed to leave on for anybody else, and stood in her doorway with the feeling of a steady pulse in her throat. She wasn't fleeing Santa Fe. She was honoring what it had taught her to tell the truth with her whole mouth, to protect the work of her hands, to choose the terms of her own rescue. At the airport, she texted her parents. A selfie silver necklace catching the sun, travel mug in hand, a face that looked like relief without the collapse. Her mother replied with a heart and a grocery list of advice. Her father, never wordy, sent a line that made her eyes sting. "Proud of your spine and your kindness." When the plane lifted over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, Amelia watched the city shrink, not as a loss, but as a completed procedure: incision, illumination, repère, closure. Ahead, waited classrooms full of clinicians, rooms where light would flood, the places people were afraid to look, and a life in which she would never again barter her instincts for someone else's storyline. She didn't need a vow to seal it. She needed only her own yes. Betrayal tries to convince you that your only choices are rage or surrender. Dr. Amelia Hart discovered a third path: clarity. She learned that boundaries are not punishments, they're instructions for how to be treated. Telling the truth plainly, with receipts, does more than expose a lie. It returns you to yourself. Growth wasn't Amelia becoming harder. It was her becoming exact document. Decide and act in daylight. She stopped auditioning for the role of forgiving wife and started practicing the role of reliable narrator, the one who charts what happened and chooses what happens next. Forgiveness, she realized, isn't a door you open on command. It's a garden that grows only if safety, accountability, and time are present. Closure didn't arrive as revenge. It arrived as agency, protecting the work of her hands, honoring the truth with witnesses, and leaving when she chose. The lesson is simple and demanding. Build systems that outlast your feelings. Set consequences you can keep, and let your future be written by your values, not someone else's appetites. You are not obligated to stay in a story that refuses to tell the truth.